Good evening, Britain, and welcome to election night. After a, let's be honest, toxic campaign, Britons have gone to the polls to have their say and decide the next parliament. Now, we're on track for an interesting night, as this campaign seems to be unpredictable. There isn't a clear winner or a clear loser either, as the debate threw extra uncertainty on the polls. And also, reflecting on the context of the night we're about to have, this election saw the first female leader of a major party in several years, and also saw a record turnout, eclipsing July 2020. No doubt the results will be substantial, and they'll also define Britain's position as we leave lockdown and enter summer. More voters than ever before have come out to cast their ballots, and this election night, we're putting more effort than ever before, too, into making sure all those votes are displayed thoroughly, accurately, and interestingly. In Westbridge, we have combatant painting the map of Britain as the results come in, while Sangus Firan is here in studio coloring our map. Then we have Nathless, by our virtual Downing Street, ready to explain the paths parties have to number 10, while also sitting here on the main desk with me, Tormentium, and Atrophier. Torm is still on the party desk as he's always been, grilling party leaders and party reps as they try to make sense of the results. And then, for the first time this election, we'll have Atrophier with some special guests at the guest desk, hosting citizens and journalists, getting their commentary on the results. But before we go to the results and the whole show, let's go to Nathless and then Sangus.
Good evening, and here we are in our new virtual Downing Street. Last election, we saw the Reform Party hitting that 25 seats, just one short of a full majority, and the Liberal Democrats falling behind with only 8 seats, ending up with 12 after a merger. After 2 months and lots of changes, the question tonight is whether any party can get 25 seats or more and send their leader through this door with a majority.
Tonight I will be taking you through the map of Great Britain, showing you the results in real time on our interactive election map, along with the Discord channel where I will be posting each and every seat call. What will this mean? Are the results significant? You will find out tonight.
Thank you for both of your hard work this evening, and thank you to Torm and Atro for what they'll be doing later tonight. In just a moment, we're going to go to the exit poll, but I must still thank Sparky 5 million for the studio, Channel 5 for their ever excellent production, Servation for their exit poll, and all the party guests, citizens, and journalists coming on tonight. I'm so thankful for the opportunity to do election night, and I'm so thankful for this team. Now, polls are nearly closed. So close. Let's go to the exit poll. There we have it. The results of the general election, or rather, what we're predicting will be the results. As you all know, this is an exit poll, and the exit poll is saying the Liberal Democrats will come first with 18 seats. The Conservatives will come second with 16, and then there will be a tie for last place with Labour and the Reform Party. This is an upset compared to the last election. This result would have the Liberal Democrats gaining 2 seats if you consider their merger with the High Tories. The Conservatives would much more than double their results. Reform would collapse, less than half of their results. And, well, New Labour would, I believe, quadruple their seats, though that doesn't say too much since they're only starting off with 2 seats. Nonetheless, this is, if true, a hung parliament. No party over 20. That's a big deal. So, we'll see. I want to get Nathan's opinion.
So yeah, that I was actually very surprised by that exit poll. I think it's a shame that Reform has gone from having 25 seats to 8, but I think everyone expected Reform to lose seats as it happened, but I didn't really think that would be that many seats. Although this is just an exit poll, who knows how many actual votes it will be as we get to the end of the night. I think Parliament, it will be, we can see from the exit poll, my prediction that there's going to, Labour and Reform are the moneymakers here, and especially the campaign. It's been quite a toxic campaign. So it depends if, I don't think Reform would go for a coalition with the Lib Dems. I'm not sure about Labour. So Labour and Reform are the moneymakers here, and it's if they will go and help what party they want to help with.
And we'll talk about this more later, but I'm kind of thinking of the fact that the Liberal Democrats were banking on a coalition with the Tories. Now the Tories are 2 seats off from them, so who knows if that's viable, though we're not the ones to say. Torm, do you have any comments on this exit poll?
I think it's quite exciting for her. I think the Liberal Democrats, obviously, since we get to see another new party kind of come into this surge, an unusual selection, because I know we've seen the Conservatives for a long time. For example, they were in power for like a year. So I like seeing new parties come and go. But what Nathaniel was saying, I think the collapse of Reform is expected. It shows that the personality and prestige of Nathaniel himself carried the party, and now the party will have to kind of find a new identity and really establish itself beyond what Nathaniel brought to the table.
I completely agree, and you're right on the fact of the new parties having influence and all that. It's just another interesting day in Britain, isn't it, with another interesting result. I'm going to go now to Atrophere to see if he has any comments on these results, these interesting exit poll results.
This is unprecedented. We've just had a political party which has collapsed in their vote share. We've had the Conservatives it was almost unpredictable that they would go this high if this exit poll was to hold up. And I think this is a really, really big political upset, and I think it's very, very interesting. And I think the Lib Dems, I think we definitely did think that this would be a very, very close election, but we didn't think it would be this close.
This close, yeah, totally. I expected Andre to have a comfortable lead from which he could pick his own partners, but evidently not. Though he might still have room. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be coalition negotiations starting yesterday. Now that they're seeing the polls, they're rushing.
Yeah, I have heard some things that discussions have already been taking place, but yeah. I think that Tories doing incredibly well has really changed what the plan was for the Lib Dems and Tories. And I'm not sure, as I said, what will actually happen in terms of what government will be formed. Have some people overestimated how far they'd actually go in the election and have messed up who they need to friend to actually form a government? We won't know till the end of the night.
And isn't that the fun of this? We won't know until the end of the night how true that is. And I'll say this for those listening. The exit poll has been completely right before and been utterly wrong. So, as I said in the introduction, once again, we're left with an unpredictable result as things are coming through. I just want to reiterate some of the things we already spoke about. I said in my intro. The results will be coming in. You'll see them on the ticker here. You can see them in the UK Discord. And if you would like to go bother Combatant, you can go to Westbridge to talk to him. And as he fills in the results bit by bit. It's a very interesting night, and I'm very excited to see how things are going to go. So, we spoke about coalitions a little bit, and obviously the Liberal Democrats' intended coalition is gone. I want to get some opinions now, just really firmly, on what we can expect from New Labour in coalition negotiations. Because New Labour, it's a left-wing party, kind of. Though, to be fair, it was a far-right party becoming now a center-left-ish party. Atro, do you think New Labour would consider a deal with the Tories? Do you think they're going to consider a deal at all? What would you do if you were Brandon?
If I was Brandon, I'd speak to party leaders. I'd try to see what I could get out of a deal, and I just think people have attacked the New Labour Party so much during this election. I think it'd be really forgiving of Brandon if he was to enter anything, considering the things that he's been targeted with at this election. If I just think this will be very interesting, and I think Brandon could enter, but could enter any sort of agreement. But I don't think it'd be a coalition. I think parties at most would really want to do a confidence and supply with New Labour. I think we'll just have to see how it goes.
Oh, and that's another variable I hadn't really thought of. That it might not just be coalitions. New Labour did say they were going to be willing to at least not vote against a King's Speech if it were to go out there. They'll just go with whatever happens. Who knows? That might be a massive factor here, because New Labour, now that I come to think of it, this is a very hung parliament, but for all we know, New Labour might just make sure that we don't go to another election. That being said, Brandon, seeing his massive growth, might reconsider such a proposition. Nathus, I'd like to go to you and talk about Binny in general, because Binny was sort of thrust into office last election, and it was just, pretty haphazard, to be a little frank, now that we're past that last election. He since has steadied the ship. What should Binny's goal be here? He's revived the Tory party, but he revived the Tory party based on his own successes at the debate, I would say. Would you guys agree with that? Actually, let me ask that. Would you say that the Tories have gone from, a second-level party to a first-place party, or at least first-place contending party, because of that debate, Nathus, Atro, Torm?
That debate, we saw that from the question of the day poll, that Binny was obviously the more favoured out of the four. I think on the debate, specifically, some people played what they actually thought was going to happen, and we've seen so much confidence from certain people this election, that I feel they're going to be a bit left behind in terms of the actual results. I feel like with New Labour, they have been a bit of a attacked party, especially, but Binny's a strong candidate for PM, although he was obviously thrown into position after Radcliffe left, and they didn't do very well last election. But in Parliament this term, they've all held the government to account. They've all stood up. They've all asked questions, and it's been a pretty solid term for the Tories in terms of now they've built themselves up to get 16 seats in an exit poll from 5 is a pretty major growth.
In my opinion, the Conservatives already had momentum going for them at first, and it was just, I think the debate added on to that momentum and sort of added fuel to the fire. And I think the fact that we've had a party leader who just 8 months ago wasn't even in this group, going from 5 seats to, according to this exit poll, 16 seats, I think it's almost unprecedented, if I'm being honest. But I think the debate would definitely helped them gain members, and I think it sort of gave, I think a lot of voters who went to the polls a lot of them would have based their vote off of that debate.
Very true. I have to agree. In a moment, we're going to go to Torm at the party desk with a representative from the Liberal Democrats and the Reform Party. Before we do, though, Torm, I want to ask you again. The same question I've asked you a few times. It seems like politics keeps reverting to like a 2016 era election, if you know what I mean. Like, the results here are very hung like they used to be. And I feel like we've said that a few times before. Do you think this is a new rhythm in Parliament to go from a very stable majority to hung parliament to stable majority to hung parliament? Or do you think this is just a few one-offs?
So far it's been a few one-offs, right? It's only really been kind of it's been intermediate when we see the big party, like especially Ignathlus, stepping down, and it's okay, now it's a free-for-all. I think after this election we can make a decision if we've really kind of hit a stride of like a 2016 era of like all the parties being very competitive. And I like when all the parties are competitive because it shows that politics is healthy, right? That there is equal participation and willingness to push new policies and get people involved versus one party coming in and sweeping everyone like we saw with reform last term. So I'm very excited to see if these exit poll results are correct, because I believe, in my opinion, this is just as someone who's seen a lot, that a Lib Dem conservative coalition would be very strong in that equal partners in government can really produce results instead of one party overpowering another, or an unequal relationship that just kind of bitters any progress in government.
No, I actually, come to think of it, in real life, you do see grand coalitions often, and let me try and do the numbers here, getting out my calculator. So 18 for the Liberal Democrats plus 8 for either of the other parties would produce 26 seats. Tories plus either of the other parties would produce a minority. I don't know how much, that's very razor thin here, where one seat off the exit poll could give Tories a majority with a coalition partner. So I wouldn't say that the Tories have no path to government with another coalition partner. That's just statistical error, but statistical noise. But I think you're quite right that it'll be a very narrow coalition, whatever it is, no more than maybe 3, or in a very interesting world, 4 seats above the majority line. So perhaps the Liberal Democrat Conservative coalition, after all, might indeed come about. As I said, we're getting prepared to move over to the party desk. We're doing a little work to get that through. In the meantime, let's discuss the seats that have come in. So far, Conservatives have held North Yorkshire. Gloucestershire has been held for the Liberal Democrats. Yes, Gloucestershire is, if I am remembering correctly, Gustav Rhodes' seat. North Yorkshire is Theo Novak's seat. So quite an interesting display so far. Some holds, but obviously these early seats probably aren't that indicative of the results to come. I want to get your thoughts now on turnout, Atrophier. Turnout, I think we can confirm now, is the highest it's ever been. 500 and... Oof, a lot. Let me get the numbers. 500 and about 560 votes. That's 60 more votes than we got in the July 2020 election. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you think that's affected the result, Atro?
Well, I think it's very, very interesting. I mean, we had a big coronavirus term. I'm sure everyone here will remember. The fact that we've gone over that, I think, is very big for the United Kingdom, considering most people are back at school now. But on how it would reflect on the results, I think it would probably favour the Conservatives and possibly the New Labour Party too, just because of their sort of real life branding, maybe even the Lib Dems, but I think the fact that they're 2 major parties in real life, I think would sort of help them in terms of the amount of people who have gone out, because the likelihood of people recognizing those real life parties and actually casting their ballot for them would just be a lot higher. That's just my opinion.
So you do think Labour and the Tories are at an advantage here because of their real life recognition?
Yeah, I definitely think that they are at somewhat of an advantage because of their
Would you say the Liberal Democrats have any advantage there? I'm trying to parse it together with taking reform into account, because that gives us an interesting dichotomy since they just do not exist in real life. Do you think it's a hindrance for parties to not be based on someone real life?
I think it can be at times. I definitely think that if we were to have fictional parties, it sort of people just wouldn't really recognize them, and I think people wouldn't really be familiar with them as they are in real life. When you see a party like the Conservatives, you really know what they stand for. You know that they're right leaning.
You get your Thatcherism going, yeah.
If you see a party like New Labour, you know that they're left leaning. I just think that you really know their like value set if they're a real life party.
No, and I would agree that you'll see people who just join the Tory party, and it's just like someone with the last name Thatcher, someone with the name Proud Conservative in their bio, or someone who'll join Labour. It's socialists, K-pop stans, what have you. Yeah, I would agree with that to an extent, though. I'm not sure how much I would agree that it's a hindrance for parties not to be named, because Nathless last election got a majority on a pretty brandless party, unless you are someone who's gonna, watch the news and associate Brexit Party with Reform Party.
Brexit Party.
Yes. That was your party, Nasus. But yeah, I think it's less of a hindrance for parties not to be named and more of just a benefit for like the Tories. I don't even think it's a benefit for Labour. I remember leading Labour and struggling to find people who would vote for me, not because of anything, who I was, what my policies were, but they were like, I'm not voting for Corbyn. I'm like, you're not. You're voting for like Roblox Labour. I'm like, I'm not voting for Corbyn, and they block me or whatever. So I think it's a little more nuanced than that. Though I know there were some complaints that they were gonna, with the easy voting, there was going to be a little bit of an excess of people just going and strolling into the polls. I don't know how much it affected the results, so. We're still trying to get that party desk going. Once the production team lets me know we're ready, we're going to go straight over to it, Torm. Let me just double check where we are with seats so far. If I am correct, we just had those 2 holds. And okay. So Liberal Democrats have just held Highlands and Islands. Liberal Democrats have held, I believe that's, not know what seat that is. I'll have to check on the map. I do not know what seat that is on the map. My apologies. But so the results are currently 1 for the Tories, 1 for Labour, 2 for the Liberal Democrats, and 0 for Reform so far. Interesting results. I wonder if that'll be indicative. So far, it's difficult to extrapolate if it's following the exit poll. And once we get more seats, we'll go back to St. Goose in the studio so he can explain to us where we are with the map. But in the meantime, just making sure the production team knows that we have to go to the party desk. I want to go back to Torm real quick before he goes to the party desk. And I want to get his opinions on, so if there is that grand coalition you're talking about, do you think it would hurt the activity of Parliament if the opposition is 16 and the government is like, I believe 34? That would be the other number. Do you think that'd be something we'd have to worry about, Torm?
On a realistic level, the activity of Parliament wouldn't diminish because the government is the one still presenting bills. So if these parties want to succeed in executing their agenda, they still need to basically pass their bill. And at that point, with the majority government, opposition is a formality. If the government is totally united on the agenda, then whatever the opposition says doesn't matter. So I think we'll see a lot more discussion maybe in government instead of in Parliament. For example, that sort of activity, you're not going to have an outward hostility that generates angst and interest. But I don't think that's a negative thing. I think with a 16-seat opposition, you can still have that sort of adversarial relationship without actively diminishing the productivity of Parliament, basically.
I respect that. Okay. So we're ready to go to the party desk now, just letting the production team know. But before we do, I forgot to mention, if you want your commentary read out on the air, tweet with Election Night RX, Election Night R. And if it's a funny comment, an astute observation, you'll hear my voice reading out your commentary. We're already getting a few tweets, but I want to get some more before we go there. But okay, let's go to the party desk. We have Sheik, I do not know how to say that, and then we have Kian from the Liberal Democrats and Reform parties, respectively. Okay, let's move over there now with Torm.
So I want to welcome you both. I want to start with Kian here from the Liberal Democrat Party. I think you're an interesting candidate to have on here since your perspective is rather unique, being in many different parties, I would say, the past couple elections. So I want to hear your thoughts on the success of the Liberal Democrats so far.
I think the Liberal Democrats have been extremely successful. As a party, we've tried lots of different methods. There's been rallies, videos. I think it is a really exciting movement, to be honest, compared to any of the other kind of parties I've been in. It's unique, I think.
What makes it different?
Well, the different methods of campaigning. There's quite a lot of unique characters as well. Quite a lot of people, very experienced, unique policies as well, like in the Home Office especially. Radical change, really, which I think a lot of parties have kind of just been status quo the past few elections. Even myself, when I was, a party leader, were a bit status quo, but the Lib Dems is really something different.
So I want to get to Sheik on that, because he is from the Reform Party, because they campaign on a similar note, correct, as a reform, something radical, something new. And I do really want to extrapolate this point for people, like, what makes your party unique? Because just saying we're different doesn't always seem to get out the agenda, right? It doesn't seem to translate to actual results. So do you think, if this exit poll is correct, what is really new and unique about the Liberal Democrats?
In terms of the exit poll, I'm not surprised if it's correct or not. The Liberal Democrats have had a really strong campaign this election. But in terms of being different, I would call that a stretch. They appeal to the people. Everyone wants to appeal to the people when you're in politics. And if they're going to really enact change, then I find that surprising, because from what we've seen in the past, Liberal, well, not as in opposition, but during this campaigning term, we've seen a really tide of unpreparedness from the Liberal Democrats. They don't really have bills in mind. They say they'll do legislation, but they don't have anything in mind that's ready to be laid out right away once they get in government. So I feel like we'll see a lot of time go by before we see anything really happen. And maybe that might change by the time the middle of the term hits. But considering the majority they might get to with the coalition, I find that really unlikely.
What do you think about that,
To
Kian?
disagree with that, really. We've got, if you actually read our manifesto, it's a lot of different stuff, especially Home Office, Treasury. It's all the other manifestos are quite similar, I thought, this election.
So do you think the campaign is what sets you apart?
I think campaign policy, the people involved, all set us apart, really. I think a lot of the other parties are quite similar.
Okay. And then, Sheik, what do you think, going off the exit poll, what do you think, would you say, I don't want to say fail, because fail is a strong word, but what do you think changed from Reform's last performance as majority government to this election?
Well, of course, the biggest change has to be the loss of our leader and our biggest momentum bringer, which was Nathless. He really brought the whole, the horses, you could say, to the Reform Party that actually won the race. But I'm pretty sure the Reform Party still has the horses to continue maintaining at least somewhat of a lead during the race. Not enough of a lead, but enough to stay in the race for sure.
Are you comfortable with the campaign your party has led this election so far?
I would say I'm comfortable with the campaign we've led. I think we all gave in our effort. I just feel like we didn't give in enough effort towards towards this election this year. I feel like we could have done better in some aspects. Yeah.
That's fair. And I think the note that Connor brought up earlier about toxicity, ultimately you parties will have to work together in some degree in government. So I'm curious to know, how do you think after this campaign period you're going to come back together and really discuss and get out policies? Is that something you want to do? Are you just going to sort of keep insular to your ideas, or do you want some bipartisanship?
Actually, since last term, even when we did have a comfortable majority over the opposition, I've always been trying to get some bipartisanship with the opposition. To be honest, I feel like it's not something that both sides really work on. Like myself, I like to work on, but I'm not sure if my colleagues like bipartisanship as much. And I'm pretty sure some on the other side rather not have bipartisanship. But I feel like, if two minds work together, then bipartisanship can be achieved for sure.
And Kian, what do you think?
I think, to be fair, the last few elections, whether they've been toxic or not, there's been different extents. I remember after Theo Novak's New Labour, Josh Miller's Tories, there's all talk of it being toxic. But what seems to happen after every election is everyone does tend to, get together, and there's a couple disagreements between certain people, but the vast majority, I'd say 45 of the 50 MPs, get along well, and actually progress is made working together. So I think, it'll be a good term, no matter what happens, really.
Well, that's exciting to hear. And before we go back to Connor, do either of you have any thoughts you want to share about this election, your leadership, just anything?
No.
I'd just like to wish good luck to all the other parties, and obviously everyone who's watching, waiting to see how their seat goes and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
I like that energy, and we'll go back to Connor.
Thank you very much. Well, what an interesting comment we heard from some of them. My interest was piqued quite a bit listening to that. Nathan, do you have any comments on what you heard? Listening to the party guests.
Well, the Lib Dems have certainly peaked with their campaign. Most polls have shown them out on top. Most polls have shown them to be the biggest party, and some polls have even shown them to be pushing further to a majority. But the exit poll has been completely different to other polls, and as the night moves further, we'll have to see how it goes. But the Lib Dems have spiked. I'm not sure if it would have spiked as much as they liked it to, or in terms of actually voting, because we have had a really high turnout this election. But yeah, I think some of what Kian has said is very true.
And I think that'll bear really interestingly if these parties are right now in their back rooms trying to figure out their coalitions, these words on here do matter, and it might influence a little tension between the parties on here, might reflect something else going on. I think it's time we can start extrapolating a little bit of information from the seat tickers. So the Tories have 3, Liberal Democrats 4, New Labour 1, and Reform 1. The exit poll's coming true. Obviously those ratios will morph a little bit, but I think we can be confident the Liberal Democrats and Tories are going to pull ahead. And the Tories might be pulling ahead at a rate equal, if not a little bit less, than the Liberal Democrats, which is, as I mentioned earlier, a big upset from what I was expecting personally. I was expecting a Liberal Democrats at 36% of the vote, Reform not pretty far behind, if I'm honest, at 26%, the Conservatives not far behind, and then New Labour with whatever's left over. Obviously that's not happened at all. Nowhere near that. In just a moment, we're going to go over to the interview desk. But in the meantime, while we're getting that set up, and the production team will get that set up very soon, I'm going to look through Election Night RX, the tag. Gustav Rhodes, member for Gloucester, who just had that seat re-elected, said that he thinks the result's pretty clear. The Reform Party is nothing without Nathless. Take that as you will. We are seeing from George Bezina that he thinks it's an interesting night so far, that he's interested by the new faces all around, and he's looking forward to some of their fresh approaches. Totally would agree. Speaker Doug Domadome says that the returning officers have nearly finished the count. That is incorrect. Please be aware of fake news. Tarhay Osborne is asking from when Kian was on screen, why is he so large? I suppose you could forward that to himself. Philip Neem says he voted for, or Philip Deschart, I think his name is now, said he voted for the Philip Deschart party. Speaking of which, this election we offered the ability for voters to spoil their ballots. The spoiled ballots were largely minimal compared to the rest of the results, though I think the spoil ballots were around 34 votes compared to about 34 invalids, which is, relatively online with what we would have expected given the massive purges we just did of the group. Yeah. Okay, let me see if there's anything else interesting before we move on. Someone is live reporting, lazy typical like always, is live reporting the constituencies if you want to look. If we haven't given you enough options with Westbridge, with the Discord, with the live stream, you can go on Twitter too to get the live results. I'm trying to see if there's anything else quite interesting. Taoiseach of Ireland is saying she's wishing good luck to everyone in the election and looks forward to working with everyone. All right, so as we're still working on getting those people over, I want to move back to Nathless. People were saying to you that, or saying rather on Twitter, that Reform Party is nothing without you. How does that make you feel?
I started the Reform Party as something which would continue on without me. I did plan originally to obviously continue and do a second term, but when school came around, it just wasn't possible. I think when I started the party, I started it with Gerald, and with Gerald going, I feel, and me, and then some other people, I feel maybe it has lost its little piece of where it came from. Like certain things I wouldn't have allowed or wouldn't have done in terms of how or what they've presented it as this election. But I do think that it will continue. The people in it are great. Yes, this time this election has fallen down a bit, but remembering when I first started the party, a lot of the people who came to Reform came from the Nathless and Parliament server, the independent server, which I created before. So we did see a lot of people coming from there. And obviously, as I moved on, other people moved on. They might have looked at a different perspective of what the term had brung or something like that. But I do feel Reform, maybe a rebrand will happen soon of some sort. But, we'll see. I know certain people like Dean, they're going to be there till the party dies or sinks. I'm sure he'll do whatever he can to keep the party alive, even if it is a rebrand of such.
Perfect. Well, thank you for those comments, and that's a very unique perspective we're getting right now. We're about to pan over to Atrophere at the party desk. We're just getting all the guests set up now. Atrophere, take it away.
So hello everyone. With me today we've got Batman TV's bro, 123, who is a Westbridge local radio host, and we've also got Josiah Bartlett, who is the former deputy leader, I believe, of the old Labour Party. So both of you unmute yourselves.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I'm gonna begin with you, Batman. As you know, you've been covering the election quite widely as a Westbridge local radio host. I know that you were covering it yesterday, and that was quite interesting. What have you thought about the campaign so far?
I think the campaign itself it's been tense, I'd say. I'd say it's been toxic, yeah. It's been tense and toxic, and I think it's been I can't really explain it. I'm trying to think. It's just, I think it's been a tight battle. That's all I can say.
I definitely agree with you on the fact that it's been a tight battle. Over to Josiah now. So, Josiah, you have been in politics before as the former deputy leader, I believe, of the Labour Party. What has changed since you've been in politics, and how do you think it compares to now?
Well, I think that there's certainly been less parties running in this election. Obviously, last election it was like 7 parties. It was It was absolutely crazy. That certainly decreased. I think that's a good thing to see. I think there's certainly been a change in, there's possibly been a change of heart in many people and how they feel politics is going and where they actually want it to go. Obviously, last term we saw Reform got a big majority with Nathless as their Prime Minister, and now they're obviously down at 8. I'm not actually going to rule the Reform Party out right now because I know the position that they are in, because I myself was in that position when Labour had 22 seats in June to having 6 seats in July. So I know the position that they're in. I won't rule them out. We'll see what happens next time. I mean, maybe they can make a resurgence. I have no idea. I don't know the leadership of their new leader, Reba, all that well myself. But obviously, New Labour, which was BNA previously, that certainly, they've went up in a few seats, I think. I can't remember their count. And obviously, you've got the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, which is also rising. Either or Benny or Andre could be Prime Minister, depending on how the night goes. I have no idea. I'm very curious, but there certainly has been a shift, I think you could say, in some people's hearts as to where they want the country to go forward.
I'd say that that's very respectable of you to come at that with personal experience. Back to Batman. I mean, this campaign has been long. The results are quite close. What do you think about? What are your predicted results?
I think it's. I'm not. I can't really decide at the moment if it's going to be Conservative or Liberal Democrat. I think it's a very tight race between the two at this point. I mean, the way Binny I've lost my words. Performed in the debate, I think that swayed a lot of people's votes towards Conservative. So I'm not too sure what we'll see, but yeah, I think it's definitely going to go to Liberal Democrat or Conservative.
What about you, Josiah? What are your personal predictions for the result?
Well, as already said, it's either going to go to the Conservative or the Liberal Democrats. Just one seat going to the Conservatives. We'll have no idea. The likelihood is, I think we will see a deal made by the end of tonight or even tomorrow morning. As for who will be in that deal, I have no idea. I personally believe that we will see Andre as Prime Minister. I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm very open to seeing what happens over these next 2 months. I've already said that. I'm going to be keeping my eyes wide open. I think it will be Andre, though. I think he will be Prime Minister. I think a deal made, whether that's with Labour or Reform, I have no idea. But I could be wrong. And something could happen tonight, and Benny could be walking into the industry. I have no clue. I'm very curious to see what happens.
Personally, I like thinking ahead a bit. So, if parties were to go into coalition, what do you think the impact would be on them at the next election? Do you think that they'd increase in size, or do you think it'd sort of limit them a little bit as to what they can do in the next election? Batman, you first.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So yeah, I can repeat it. So essentially, what the question was, do you think that if parties were to enter a coalition, do you think that it suppress their vote at the next election, or do you think their vote share would go up? Do you think that the lower parties specifically were to enter into a coalition, do you think that the lower parties would benefit or not benefit as a result of that?
I don't think they'd benefit from it, really. I think coalitions have never, in my eyes, really worked, like, ever. I think afterwards it's always a decline for the smaller party involved, and it's usually, from what I've seen, it goes up for the main, bigger party.
Oh, I would agree. I would sort of agree with you on that, in the fact that sometimes coalitions don't work out, but I think quite a bit of the time they do. I think it just really depends on the strength of parties working together. Josiah, what do you think? What do you think the impact will be on the votes cast?
Would I think the impact will be on the what? Sorry.
What do you think the impact will be on the parties if specifically the junior parties, if they were to enter into a coalition?
Right. Okay. So let's say, for example, I don't know why, but when you asked me the question earlier, I obviously said Andre probably be the Prime Minister. For some reason, I'm thinking that they might go with New Labour. No idea why. Could be very wrong. As for the impact, it ultimately does depending on how they cooperate with each other, I think. Because when I seen Theo and Karanka during the New Labour Liberal Democrat coalition last year, from what I saw, they got on well. I think there may have been maybe a distaste towards the end. I can't exactly remember, but it ultimately depends on the cooperation between the two. I think it depends on how other parties make the other parties out going into the next election. Or I don't know, would the Liberal Democrats slander New Labour if they went into coalition next time? I have no idea. Cooperation, that is what we're going to have to think about. And I think it comes down to that cooperation. That'll depending on how well parties do. Are they going to slander each other next election? Probably wouldn't rule it out. Or but are they going to be respectful upon one another? Because it is their government. It's just not. It's not just one party government. It's both of them contributing to try and make the country a better place. So I think it boils down to how well they cooperate. I know I repeated that a lot, but yeah, I think it just depends on that, and it depends how well Andre would work with Brandon or Reba or whoever if Benny was to work with someone else. I think it boils down to that. We'll see.
Well, I'd like to thank both Josiah. It's nice to see you again, and Batman for coming on. I'm sure that I wish you the best of luck. Going forward, I know Josiah. I think you're planning on. I don't know if you're planning on coming back to politics, and I wish Batman the best of luck with his show on Westbridge Daily Radio. So thank you. We're going to go back to Connor.
Yes, I found that was quite interesting. Those commentaries. Josiah's input was very, very useful, and I'm glad we were able to have them on. That's, as many of you know, a new part of the show that we're doing. So just to give you a little run-up of where we are so far, we've just called Lincoln for the High Tories. So that is 5 seats for the... Lincoln for the High Tories, no, Lincoln for the Liberal Democrats. Sorry, that's instinctive, because Lincoln was always a High Tory seat, which, as many of you know, the High Tories merged with the Liberal Democrats. So now we have that interesting dynamic where some pretty far-right seats are safe Liberal Democrat ones now, because I expect Kean to return to Parliament, and of course Kean will have to represent Lincoln, as he always has. But anyways, as I was saying, we have 5 seats for the Tories, 3 seats for New Labour, 6 for the Liberal Democrats, and 3 for Reform. This is paralleling the intro pretty directly, I'd say, or the exit poll pretty directly. But before I go into too much depth, I want to give it to Sengu, who is at the map, so he can discuss how we are.
Hello, good evening. So I just wanted to say quickly that we're still very early into the night, and we can't see a lot at the moment for what's happening. There's been a lot of holds. The Lib Dems have been good at taking their former Tory seats in Northern Ireland, and we should see that across the country as they pick up the mergers seats. You have to check in later to hear more.
And I just want to ask, where do you think we're seeing changes so far to the last election? Like, any signs of interest that you've identified yet, or is it a little too early for that?
It's a little early, but Reform are collapsing across the whole country in all regions. We can say that for sure.
And we're at now 18 seats, almost halfway through,
Indeed.
and no parties above 10. This was one of our worries in the last election, if you recall, guys, but I'll get to that a little bit later. Now I think if we're ready to move to Nathlis at our virtual Downing Street, that would be excellent, though I have to get word from the production team. But that's what we're doing next, so you can get
I'm ready for you at
excited. So we're
Downing
gonna see the
Street if
state
you
of
want
the
me to be.
parties. Yes, let's move over to Downing Street then.
So, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Virtual Downing Street. So, I'm going to be talking about possible coalitions here. I haven't set up the tiles, but we'll just go with the move. We have as I said at the beginning, Labour and Reform are the kingmakers here, especially with forming any type of government. If Reform, we're going to go with Tories. Looking specifically at the exit poll, that would be they would be lacking a majority by, I think, one seat, because Conservatives have 16, Reform have 8. If Labour and Liberal Democrats were to go into a coalition, they would have a 26 seat, 26? Yeah, a 26 seat majority, which will allow the Speaker, Doug Dominant, to actually run, because the Speaker becomes an independent seat. And this is where it could all go a bit ickledy-pickledy. If Andre Hodge decides he must keep his majority in what he forms, is Doug going to be able to run for Speaker? Is he going to rebel what Andre says, a bit like what Michael Maltby Supreme Durka did? Or is he going to continue? Although I think we can definitely rule out any coalition between Reform and Liberal Democrats. During that time of the whole campaign, we've seen quite a lot of anti-reform from the Liberal Democrats. So I think that coalition can be ruled out straight away. But we will definitely see either Binny Boy 19, or Andre Hodge walking through the door behind me later tonight.
Well, isn't that interesting? And I have to agree that coalitions are going to be awkward for some people this time. And we might be left with a very unexpected deal. As I was saying, if you want to contribute to the show, tweet at ElectionNightRx. You can go to either Westbridge server. We're doing seats in both. Thank you to everyone there combatant in the larger server, and then George Ross of Kildare and Dom in the smaller server. Of course, you can check out Sangoose's constituencies in the Discord, or just listen to us. We'll give you updates, as Nathan just did. The exit poll slowly starting to take shape. From what I'm hearing on Twitter, people are expecting Lib Dems to get in government. Michael Healy-Rae, who is TD for Munster in the Irish Free State, says he believes the Lib Dems will get in gov through a coalition. We are seeing... there's a question here. How constituencies are done. So, how to decide the order revealed for constituencies? It's normally done in a way to keep the result as mysterious for as long as possible, but also we don't like to mislead people too much because that would be very mean. So it's just sort of randomized. Sangoose, if anyone has questions, they can be forwarded to him after the election because he handled the order for this election. Finn Nolan, who is... I do not know what party he's from, but it says he's a former member of parliament. It says it's looking good for the Liberal Democrats. Tyler says that he wants Andre Hodge as leader, as prime minister, rather. And Ella Hella, I think, I don't know how to say that. She's very thankful for the election stream, and she looks forward to every time. Thank you very much. It's a lot of work, and it's not perfect, but I'm very happy that we've been able to do this now for the 6th or 7th time. But yes. So, as we've seen now, apparently, as has been mentioned a few times again, right now what we're kind of foreseeing is there might be a superpower coalition that's between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, according to what people up here have said and what word has filtered through us through the grapevine. That'd be unexpected. That would, I mean, Torm said that he not supported, but considered that a reasonable deal from the start. But I would not have looked at the results and said, yep, that's what I'm thinking is going to happen. But kind of makes sense. Either a narrow majority or a big coalition, though that's not to say that a big coalition is all easy. That would require quite a lot of derision to be overlooked between two relatively competitive parties. I know Liberal Democrats, at least in the last few days, have been getting a little concerned about the Tory party and their surge. So Now, I'd like to move on to another topic really quickly before we go back to the party desk with some more people. I want to ask Torm a general question about campaigning, because as the debate illuminated, there can be events to just shake up the campaign overnight, like that debate. Do you think DM campaigning, especially with such high turnout, meaning obviously not all 500 people got messaged, with the debate shaking things up, do you think DM campaigning still holds the weight it used to? Do you think campaigning might be going back to that, stump style reform?
I think ultimately you want to get people engaged in the actual idea of voting in your campaign, right? So you're seeing the transition now of old style. So like from Theo Novak, for example, he had a ton of people in his Discord, but those people who used to just send the Discord and filter out now, so they're not there. And you have a new base of people to collect from who don't just kind of just vote when they're told to on a Discord. They want to see you do well. They want to go to these events on Westbridge. They want to see you debate. They want to see discussion and chats and all of that. So I think it's more a difference in how people approach politics versus that Discord voting doesn't work, because we do see the highest vote turnout ever right now, correct? Is that what you said earlier?
Yes, and by a large margin.
So it evidently works, but the pendulum is shifting because people are more engaged. And I used to see this a lot when I used to run for parties, that there used to be like a front runner. He was typically a Tory who was kind of old, kind of stuffy, and they would be number one in the polls every time. And then come the debate, they would be upset. They would fall to third or fourth place by some way or another. And it is kind of fun to see that energy back in politics.
Yeah, I remember the debates used to have a little more weight. And now, obviously, I don't think the debate hurt the Liberal Democrats. I think the debate helped the Tories, because there was a lot of people who, at least I saw in election discussion, which I'm going to check out election discussion in 5 minutes to get some comments. So if you want to head there to start making comments. But in election discussion, I saw some people being like, well, I wasn't going to vote Liberal Democrat. I didn't know who to vote for. And then Binny did pretty well. Like, that might have been what helped them, and it might not have hurt it might not have hurt the Liberal Democrats, just helped the Tories, which I just find that dynamic super interesting. In a moment, we're going to get Benjamin Cosgrave and Binny on the show. Before then, I would like to speak to Atrophier. I want to get his thoughts a little, now that we're getting more of the seats and now we're hearing more people speaking about the results. Do you think the possible Grand Coalition, do you think that's actually going to come to fruition, or do you think it's just going to be a lot of talk and then they're like, well, partitioning their seats, and they're like, well, I don't want to give up Foreign Secretary, or I don't want to give up Chancellor, and nothing happens? Or do you think we might actually see that big coalition?
I'm not fully sure as to whether we're going to see a three-way coalition or more, but I just think the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if something along the lines of it happened, because it just the way things are looking right now, it's just really, really, really tense. And I think there is going to be a lot of arguing behind the scenes. I would definitely not be surprised if there were some sort of concessions that had to be made, and one of the parties who were involved in the coalition just really, really did not like the way that the negotiations were going, so just dropped out last minute, because that happens quite often behind the scenes. But I think things are going to be very interesting in terms of the coalition. But what I'm thinking more specifically is how the Conservatives are going to hold up as just the sole opposition party if that happens. The Liberal Democrats get into government in this grand coalition. I think it'd be big thinking how would they bounce back from that, because it just, as Tom said earlier, it'd just really be a formality if they were in opposition alone. I think it'd be very interesting to see how Binny would be in opposition to a majority coalition government.
And that's, an interesting circumstance to see with this whole what would opposition be if there was a grand coalition and all of that? I mean, I know in my experience, opposition was miserable, but that's because I'm not someone built for opposition. I know Torm, on the other hand, loved opposition, and if Torm wants to give it, any pep talks to the opposition, whoever it might be, now might be a better place to just say what an opposition would need to do if there is a stable government like we just had. Should they follow the course of the Liberal Democrats, or is there another way that you think they'd be able to make their name a little heard better and be a better opposition? Either of you, Nathless or Torm, could comment. So Nathless, go ahead.
I'll go for it first before Tom goes, because Tom hasn't spoken that much. I think with opposition, I personally haven't really been on opposition. The only opposition I've really been on is when I was Shadow Home Sec. It was this time last year when I first became Home Sec. So about a month ago this time last year, I was Shadow Home Sec for about 2 weeks. And that was the only time I've been on opposition. And I think being on opposition is much easier than being Gov. I remember speaking to Andre during the term, and he goes to me, he comes to Prime Minister's questions and just thinks about it on the spot. It's a lot more like that. Like, government is 24/7, 7 days a week for the 2 months that you're doing. Just no break. It's much more full on. And I think with opposition, it would be nice to see more stuff with them pushing it a bit more in terms of more holding the government to more account in other ways, such as just not in Parliament. And if this major coalition, which everyone talks about, which I'm not sure how it's going to go planning or how they would split that cabinet divide of who would take what at the precise moment, but I don't know. I think Reform and Labour, if on the opposition, would be okay. I think we might see a change of what the opposition is stance, especially with a 16-member opposition and such a large government. I think it will go back to when we had 2 parties and the government was quite large. We had Labour and Conservatives, and attendance was shocking. MPs, about 3 MPs were replaced a week. And it's can these parties maintain activity with such a large government? I'll pass you to Tom now.
I think I'm going to give my thoughts on what it's like to be in opposition and why being a smaller opposition isn't a problem, because ultimately opposition isn't about failing bills. And that might sound weird, but it's very true, because the government on 90% of the bills is going to be united. They're going to have their whip. They're going to be voting all the most important policy in. Sure, you might get the occasional kind of bad bill that might go 50-50 and you get lucky by 2 MPs defecting. Okay, you can't really rely on that. What you have to rely on in opposition is your cleverness in the approach to your questions and stylizing your campaign against the government. And what I mean is, the government is always going to have an answer for what you say. So you can't go in there with your piece of evidence, waving it around in the front of the speakers like some people have, and expect the government to be like, oh my God, he has us, he's right, I am so sorry. It's not going to happen. So it's kind of good about a small opposition in this case, so you have 8 each going off the exit poll, is that your party can kind of just come up with a few ideas. Like, we've heard something has gone wrong in the Foreign Office, and then your party can just prepare a very interesting set of questions about it. Like, why did this happen? How did this work? Has anyone asked about this? And I've asked context here about X, about Y, and about Z. And then by leaving those open questions to the government, that's when their problems start to appear. That's when disunity forms in the government, because they see that the PM has dropped the ball on certain issues versus just trying to present evidence to them or to try to speak to them as if you're a lecturer. It never works, because ultimately at the end of the day, you want to cause disunity, and that's how you win.
Mm-hmm. And I fully agree. I remember, if any of you were around in 2019 when my Labour Party won the by-election for some seat in South England, and it was a big victory. We got over 50% of the vote, and the Tories, who were in government, in a majority government, I believe, got less than 30% of the vote. And I remember that first House of Commons session after that result, and I remember watching the Tory benches just silent and just wanting to get out of there because they were embarrassed. It felt a little disunited. That's pretty much the objective, whoever is in opposition, because as much as we're talking about the Grand Coalition, there's no certainty on anything. This is politics. things are going to flip back and forth throughout the night. I know in particular, if you look at Irish coalitions, or you look at South African coalitions or Canadian coalitions, it could take through the night into tomorrow, since it's much more hung than normal. Though in Britain, we don't normally have those extended coalition negotiations that you do have in other Commonwealth nations. But I digress. We're ready to go back to Torm now, but at the party desk with Benjamin Cosgrave and party leader Binny Boy. So whenever you're ready, Torm.
Well, welcome you both. I'm very happy to have both of you on here tonight. And I think just by precedence, I'm going to start with you, Benny, and I want to hear your first thoughts about this exit poll result for the Conservatives.
Yeah, so I'm actually ecstatic seeing that the Tories have been predicted to reaching 16 seats. I mean, last term the Tories got absolutely dismantled in the election, and I came on with the goal that I'm going to rebuild the party, which is exactly what this exit poll is suggesting to do. So, yeah.
I like that. And Benjamin, New Labour, by the exit poll, as Connor pointed out earlier, you quadrupled your seats, but how important you see that remains to be seen. But what do you think?
In terms of the exit poll, you know what? I'm kind of satisfied with it. We've done better than we did last election, obviously. Of course, we'd want to have done slightly better. We aimed about 10 seats, but 8 seats, can't complain. Especially seeing as we did have limited campaigning. So, yeah, I'm quite satisfied with it.
Well, okay, so I want to go back to Benny, specifically because what do you think the Conservatives have campaigned on that really puts you over the edge, coming at least projected in second place, potentially first? It is just a 1-seat margin, coming off the back of tumultuous leadership.
Well, first of all, I think it's this idea of fresh new leadership. Like me personally, I wasn't involved in the UK for long, but the previous leadership had previously betrayed the United Kingdom, you could say. But when a different option comes on, an option that promises stability, that promises a strong leadership, then I'm sure that that would be something that the public would be attracted to. And I think in this case, the Conservatives have really managed to do that. Our campaign has been literally emphasizing the fact that if you want strong leadership, the Conservatives are there to offer that.
All right, and do you think, on this note that has been discussed before of toxicity, do you think that was present, and do you think your party engaged in toxic behavior?
Well, from our end, I think the Conservatives were quite neutral in with regards to toxicity. I think many of the other parties resorted to, you could say, slandering opponents for being from a certain political background. However, the Tories sort of stayed away from that. Yeah, we might have had 1 or 2 graphics that sort of suggested that one party may not be as good as the other, but we didn't directly go for a toxic approach. And I think we were extremely civil with how we coordinated.
All right, and before I go back to Benjamin, I just want to get your thoughts on the potential for a grand coalition with the Liberal Democrats. Are you considering, would you like to see a grand coalition to move away from the traditional formula of picking a lesser partner for more control in government and maybe going for an equal approach, share of ideas, talent, all that sorts of things?
I mean, obviously, something that we'd be looking into. However, you have to look at the many factors. Yeah, a major coalition would be really good for the country. However, imagine how disastrous it would be for the political climate if we have 30 seats on one side or something, or just say 35 or something, and then we have a 15-seat opposition. We're basically creating a recipe for the political affairs of the nation to sort of be distracted for a short period, and I don't think that would be good in the long term. So we have to look at the many factors and make a strong and advised decision from there on.
Just to follow that up, why do you think it's bad?
Well, at the moment, the political atmosphere of the United Kingdom is literally thriving, and if we are going to go into a 35-seat government, yeah, we're going to have a strong government, but what happens to the backbenchers? How are we going to ensure that there's activity from backbenchers? How are we going to ensure that there's activity from opposition? I mean, you can't really do that when you have a one-sided parliament. And I think we've heard of it in the past as well, where we've had a single-sided parliament, and it's literally caused political havoc for weeks on end. And I think that if we are to go into that direction, that is something that we need to look into, if you know what I'm trying to say. Because, yeah, we want to offer a strong cabinet, we want to offer a strong government, but we don't want to distract the political atmosphere.
All right. And now, Ben, with this projected result, where do you think New Labour goes now? What is the next step?
I think the next step for us is to most ideally remain in opposition and just capitalise on that position next election. Yeah, I think that's probably our best move. Obviously, I can't comment for sure. I don't know what decision leadership will make in regards to coalitions, etc. But yeah, I would personally like to see us remain in opposition and capitalise off that position in the next election.
All right. And with that being said, do you believe that the party leadership in New Labour has done a good job? Do you want to see them stay on and really stick to the agenda you've kind of put out? Do you think it's perfect at this point?
I think the agenda, I mean, it could have been improved in areas, but I'm not going to say that it was bad. I completely agree with the agenda. Brandon did, I think, quite a fantastic job, seeing as he basically ran a one-man show. A lot of us in the cabinet, myself for instance, had real-life commitments this week. We weren't able to engage that much, so I completely commend him for his efforts. I wouldn't want to see a change in leadership. Completely satisfied with the job he's done. Of course, we could have stepped up campaigning slightly if we had more people involved, but that's life. Yeah, I think going into the next election, same leadership, same team, we can make a bigger impact given the right preparations. So I have no complaints there.
And then just on a final note, I don't know if you have heard from Brandon or have information, but do you see New Labour open to deals for coalitions with any of the parties? Do you think you're open to all of them? Any party is going to be closed off? What do you think?
I'm not going to comment on a coalition while talks could potentially be ongoing. I'm not involved in them. I've heard there may be something there. I mean, I'm not going to confirm there's any coalitions. I'm not going to deny there's any. I think the best thing to do is just wait and see what happens. I personally would. Well, I'm just not going to comment on the matter because it's not for me to determine what will happen. Yeah, I can't rule anything out. That's what I'll say.
That's fair enough. I guess we'll see what happens. And with that, I'll let you to say anything you want to say before we go back to Connor.
Only thing I'd have. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you go first, Saladin.
No, go ahead. You're first. You spoke first.
Right. So, in terms of what happens next, I think it's really important that all parties who are present, like the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, New Labour, and Reform, really have a good think about how they want to go forward. Because if we are to make a strong and advised decision, we could take the UK far. But if we make a rushed decision, then there's a lot of things that are on hand that could really affect what happens next. Like, we could have a disrupted political climate, or we could have a strong government. But what would that mean when taken into consideration overall? Like, there's a lot of different things that the parties have to take into consideration, and I just want all of them to really look at what they want. Look at what they want for the UK and how they want the UK to end up in a month's time.
All right then, Ben.
Yeah, all I'd have to say really is I think it's quite humorous in a way that we get so much abuse throughout this election and then potentially getting all these coalition agreements. But overall, yeah, I agree. I think what we need to see happen is the best choice for UK. I personally believe in the doctrine that it should be parties with a larger majority entering government, seeing as they have the largest amount of popular support. But again, yeah, we're open to any coalitions. We'll have to see what happens. overall, I just hope that whatever result of this election, whatever parties get into government, they continue to take a sensible course of action in the governance and just don't act like clowns once they're in office.
All right. Thank you both for your time and your answers.
Thank you.
We'll
Thanks
go
very
to
much.
Connor.
Thank you very much for that. I found those to be some interesting comments. So we'll talk more about the possibility of a grand coalition after hearing Binny's updates. We'll hopefully have Andre on the show later, but we're going to go now to Sangoose to look at the map. But again, before then, I just wanted to make a quick shout out to all of those public services who are at Westridge helping keep everything running smoothly. I'm incredibly grateful for that, and I'm very thankful for everyone who's helping us put this show on the road. Okay, so I would like now to actually move straight to Downing Street with Nathless, where he'll give us some updates on the show, and then we'll go to Sangoose.
Welcome back to Downing Street, guys. So I've actually now laid out the exit poll on Downing Street floor in our virtual Downing Street. So if you can now see, as we come through on the moving camera, you can see we've got the exit poll results just laid out here. So we have, once again, let me just pull that back up. The Lib Dems on 18 seats. We have that drawn out right here. We have the Conservatives on 16 seats. And then we have Reform and Labour on 8, according to the exit poll. Well, these results could be very similar to what we actually have in terms of what the actual results may be. It may be totally different. So let's discuss what could come out of this coalition at all. Right now, we have multiple discussions taking place from what I know. I know that Labour have been very silent since the beginning of election night, and I have no idea how they're going to play out. But I know other discussions are taking place, and how those discussions go, I'm sure we'll find out by the end of the night. A major coalition between the Lib Dems and Tories is something which could take place. Who knows if it will, but it will be pretty hard to divide between what will actually happen in terms of cabinet. The Lib Dems are quite focused on Home Office and Treasury policy and building up on justice policy, but so are the Tories. The Tories have built up themselves to be very key on policy, especially foreign affairs and building up stuff like that. But we also have the two smaller parties, Reform and Labour. Labour policies are more, well, Labour policies are more basic than anything such as that. They have called for workers' rights, which are something which many people in this group will disagree with, and some may agree. Workers' rights are something which won't work in terms of in Roblox, but we'll have to see if it could work if Labour do get into government. But that is one of their key policies. But it's up to parties to decide, do they want to take on that policy with them? With a coalition between, we'll go back to the moving camera now. You can see here the Lib Dems with 18 seats. Then here, the 16 seats. You can see as I move this over with my lovely Beatles. Thank God for F3X, ladies and gentlemen. Oh. If a coalition between these two parties, the Reform and Conservatives, were going to take place, you would be short of a majority. That would be 24 seats. But if the Conservatives were going to move with the Libs, that would be, that is a hard calculation. Good almighty. Let me work that out. 16 plus 18 that'd be 34 seats majority with 16 on the opposition. That is a large majority in terms of keeping everything going. That is how talks are going. I will update you if I hear anything from any party camps. If parties want to get in contact with me about coalitions, I'm sure they will discuss, and I will be able to discuss it on here. Heading back to Connor at the main desk.
Yes, so actually I'm going to pass it right back to Sangoose, as the map is now a little more filled out, and we just heard about what the seats mean. Let's look at what they look like.
Hello, welcome back to the map. So there's a few interesting things to look at here. I'd like to first go down south here, where we can see a sort of blue wall emerging, as it were. Some very strong seats here in Heartlands, without Conservatives picking up from Reform. Certainly useful if they want to gain large presence or even government. And if we go up to the north, we can see New Labour doing well in Scotland, maybe reminiscent of Tony Blair. But who knows how the EC have decided to allocate these. One interesting seat is Durham, up here just below this one. I'll stand on it. That was actually a gain from the Lib Dems, which questions as to if the Lib Dems are actually going to fall short of their exit poll predictions. They're losing seats to another party, they're not gaining. So it's cause for concern there. Elsewhere, Reform are just clinging on to whatever they can, basically around the country on the coast. And the Lib Dems appear to be following a similar pattern, really. They've got popular support in lots of rural areas and urban ones, not really in Middle England. So yeah, back to you.
Thank you for that. And that analysis of the map is absolutely just still interesting to hear all of these interesting ways it's playing out. Because while the map itself might not reflect any actual voting, there's no one in, like, say, Durham who's picking specifically to vote for New Labour or whatever. However, it still is interesting to see areas that, like, I recall the Red Wall actually was something on this map that, you know, under the Theo Novak days, the north into Scotland was just pretty red. And then the south was, I remember, totally purple with the Imperial Party. Now, things are shaking up quite a bit more, and the map is becoming a little more clearly divided. Because when the constituency system was introduced, there was a little more of a united front among parties. There was New Labour and Imperials, and then a few scatter ones. I just find the map interesting in general. But yes, we're sorry to say that Torm will no longer be with us. He has to leave. He'll come back for the next shows, of course. But for the next parody panel, we will have Atro, which we won't go to for a few moments. I find it interesting to say now that we actually have 3 Westbridge servers running now, which is just absolutely excellent. Thank you for everyone who's interested in seeing our results. I'm delighted that we're getting this much interest. But, so, I'd like to now point to the, I want to point to what Nathos was saying with the exit poll. He was, and as we can only really speak in now, speaking in the exit poll numbers, because we don't have all the results exactly. However, as many of you know, the exit poll will not be 100% accurate, and we can't expect it to be. And so we have to take it with a grain of salt. But, still remaining, I think it's interesting to see how things are playing out, and that the results are kind of not totally being different to that exit poll. Conservatives are now tied with the Liberal Democrats, if I'm correct, if that hasn't been updated yet. And New Labour is basically tied with Reform, 1 seat off. And if I count, let me get out my handy-dandy calculator. We are at, how many seats called? I believe 35. Oh, we just called one for Liberal Democrats, so that's 36. So the exit poll is pretty on the spot still, and that's 36 of the way in. 36 seats is about 70% of the results. So for those of you who are still watching, we still have over 100 viewers. We peaked at 150 and we're at 115 now. And this is over an hour in. So very thank you to everyone who's still watching. We are going to continue the coverage up until the end, and then for as long as we can go afterwards, getting comments and scoops from the parties during coalition negotiations. But yes, continuing, I want to go to Nathless and ask him how he thinks the results are going to diverge from the exit poll. Do you think the exit poll is going to be on the spot? Do you think the exit poll is going to be a little bit off? Do you think the exit poll, might have over predicted the Tories, that the Tory surge actually might happen, but not as much as they said. Just your general thoughts on how the exit poll is going to compare now that we have a lot, 70% of the results in.
What can you confirm the actual turnout of the election?
Yeah, so the turnout, 557 total votes.
Whoa, that is ridiculous.
Yes, and then I
Absolutely.
can say we got 34 spoiled ballots, and I'm not sure on the number. I believe it was like 38 invalid ballots, something around there. So that would leave us with 489 valid votes. So you minus the 5. So you have the 557 minus 489 valid votes. Then you have the 34 spoil ballots. So that's 34 actually on the dot invalid ballots. So yeah.
So that is quite a big turnout. I think that's the most we've ever had, hasn't it? Is this the most? Yeah.
Yes, I believe so. The largest record before was 504.
Yeah. So I think we can see that in-game voting has been defo something which has changed what people have decided to do instead of PM voting, and that's seen an increase. With the Tories vote, I think the Tories have done extremely well from where they've come from 5 seats already. This is a major gains for them, and I'm sure they'll have gains. From the proportion of the exit poll, I remember, I think the exit poll result was about 140-60. Cengiz, can you back me up on that?
Sorry, what were you saying?
Exit
Wasn't
poll
listening.
numbers.
What about it?
Responses.
Oh, it was 170.
Oh, I was near. So I think that 590-ish votes to that 170 is pretty proportionate in terms of real life. If any of you've watched real life elections, they ask about not that as many people. But yeah, I think that's pretty proportionate. I'm not sure. I believe the Tories will pick up more seats. Will the exit poll be slightly wrong? Who knows? At the moment, I think it might be a few seats off, but we will see how that grows.
Yes, and the best part about exit polls is we don't know how it compares to the actual results. In a little while, we're going to get Dean from the Reform Party and Brandon from New Labour, and then we're hopefully going to get Andre. He'll probably be on his own, though we're still trying to file out the guests here. Things are coming quite stably through. The last seat we're at, where we've just called Stafford, which I don't believe Stafford has had anyone relevant hold it. I'll just look through the constituencies now to see if we have anyone interesting. Any constituency data we can provide. Redbridge was Dean Heathcote's seat. Well, is. He previously had Lancashire, but that did not go well. Bedford, who could forget the beloved Lord Bedford, the person running the constituencies in Westbridge. God bless the Lord Bedford. Yeah, that's pretty much all of the interesting seats of recent times. Nathless. Just went to you, but that's because Atro's prepping the party desk right now. I want to ask you, if you were a party leader, let's say, you probably wouldn't be leading Reform knowing how much you can galvanize the electorate and how much that's caused us problems here.
Yeah.
If you remember 2 election nights ago, we were sitting here complaining over that horrible result.
Yeah.
Where you got more votes than everyone else. But let's say you're one of the party leaders now. Maybe you're one of Liberal Democrats or Conservatives. Let's say it's a tie between the two of them and you're one of their leaders. What are you going to do? I mean, we talked about what we would want as lords, but put yourself in the body of a commoner. What's your objective? What's your goal? What's your plan?
If it does become a tie, it'll be a fight to form a coalition. I've just heard from Labour leadership sources that they aren't ruling out a coalition, but they're going for that confidence and supply rather than a coalition. But with the current results, a confidence and supply, I'm not sure how far that will go with certain parties. If I was in a position right now where, let's say, Andre and Binny are, it would be who I can gather to form a government and how strong my government will be. I'm sure they have full trust in their parties and their cabinet to be great and continue Britain's strive, which the previous government created. But elections play in different ways. You keep your your enemies close, but your friends close as well, and that's not what's happened this election. With Labour now saying that Labour leadership are saying that they prefer confidence and supply, the only coalition I can see the Lib Dems having is with Conservatives. Which, will that major coalition work? Who knows? I'm not sure about discussions on that anymore, but I 100% can say Reform won't go anywhere near Lib Dems, and that's where that has gone wrong in terms of there was so much toxicity in this election that it's completely thrown people off being even in partnership with people.
No, yeah, totally, sure. We're just putting the rest of the leaders in right now. Apologies, I was distracted by that. But no, yeah, completely agree that this is just interesting. Like, I just going to echo what you're saying. It's just completely interesting listening and seeing all of this go through. As you saw on the, how would you say, main headline, there is some celebration of the Lib Dems right now over the fact they held Epic Noah's seat of Brighton, cheers Rafa's seat. Sure, the Liberal Democrats at Westbridge were celebrating that. Glazed Aviation is saying that he finds the stream interesting and he has a feeling the Tories and Lib Dems will form a coalition. That's most of the contributions we're seeing so far. Oh, Gustav has another comment to say that the Reform Party didn't really stick. He said they were founded as an anti-establishment party, but they became the establishment. They did not learn that you cannot campaign against the establishment when you are the establishment. Well, he's speaking to you, Nathless, and I apologies for going to you again, but Atro is going to be doing a lot of speaking in a moment, so Nathless, this is Gustav referring to you.
Oh,
He said
Gustav,
you became
Gustav,
the
Gustav,
establishment.
Gustav.
I'll even link you the tweet so you can comment on it more
Yeah.
thoroughly. But I want to get, because I don't disagree totally that, like, the Reform Party is a hard name to carry when you just come out of a 25-seat government.
Well, the Reform Party reform can be seen in many ways, and I've said this many times. People say we didn't enact reforms. In my eyes, we enacted many reforms which have made changes. The country is now back in action after a horrible Conservative term before me. But the establishment which Gustav talks about, will the Reform name carry on? I think this will be the last election the Reform name is there. I think Reform will rebrand. I think they did know that you can't campaign against the establishment because, and they're not campaigning against the establishment they've been in. They're campaigning to bring more reform, more like any party, any policies campaigning for more policy that hasn't been completed, and that's that. It's not campaigning against an establishment. It's campaigning to change other things.
Yes, sorry, I didn't know if you had more to say. But, I mean, that's kind of the awkward situation we're left in with. It's not too easy to campaign, exactly. And, well, running for re-election just is hard. Even if you're not the person running yourself for re-election, people are like... I know for me, there was a lot of people who are just like, well, we're tired... Because when I was Prime Minister, I was Prime Minister for 3 months of Tenta, and then 3 months of me, and then I ran for re-election. And so that's half a year of the same party, and I remember people being like, well, I just want a different party. I'm tired of this. This is boring. So running for re-election itself is hard. I mean, how many prime ministers in the last, how would you say, 6 months, year, have actually run for re-election? Nathos didn't, Josh didn't, he who should not be named didn't. Who was before?
I mean, Josh Radcliffe has been PM many times. He pops up.
Well, to be fair, but he didn't run for re-election in his exact term. Who was before?
Well, you could say he did because he continued Miller's term and then ran again and dropped out. So
sure, and that's how we got Vinny. But no, it's not. I mean, it's not fun running for re-election, and I'm sure that was part of your calculations, Nathless. We're having trouble reaching Brandon right now, and we're having trouble reaching Andre. We plan to get both of them on, but if we just need to go on with our beloved friend, host of LBC or whatever it's called, Dean's Pub Conversations, we hope to get him on, and then Andre, and then Brandon, should everything go right. But as it's a little later into the night, there might be difficulties. Just to confirm, the stream will be going as long as we kind of can. We plan to go after the results are done, like we normally do, so we can hear some coalition negotiations. Parties listening, I would love to hear some tips, some updates from conservative headquarters, liberal Democrat headquarters. Tell me what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're doing. And I'll expose it in front of everyone. Over 100 people. Yes, a reminder that you can go to Westbridge, Twitter. Happy, we haven't been getting many tweets right now. So if you want to tweet at us, here, get your comments read out on air. Tweet me or DM me. I don't care. I'll listen to anything. We're still struggling to get... okay, Andre will be coming on next instead of Brandon. And so we'll go there in a minute with Atrophere. Atro, what information do you want to get from these party leaders now? You're going to get someone who either is first or second place, and then you're going to get Dean, who is pretty much helped carry the reform campaign, if we're being honest. Riva was kind of AWOL during this campaign. What information do you want to get from them?
I want to find out what the discussions are behind the scenes and sort of what's going on, because I don't really think we know what's going on right now, and I think it's a big factor. I think the public really, by the viewing figures right now, are really keen to know who the next government is going to be, and I just really want to know how things are panning out behind the scenes right now, if there's any discussions ongoing, etc., etc. I think it'll be very interesting to hear, and I think it would benefit the viewers to know what might their next government look like.
All right then. So let's see how long it'll be until we can get there. Stage managers, let's try and get Andre in his position, because we have Dean in position now, but still looking at that. Just let's do a quick update on the seats before we go there. So we're seeing so Leicestershire was last seat called, 12 for the Tories, 9 for New Labour, 14 for the Liberal Democrats, and 9 for Reform. I am quite interested. Oh, wait, no, I believe we called West Midlands. Yes, we called West Midlands. So that's a Labour gain from Reform. One of the many Labour gains from Reform. If we're able to, let's go to green screen so we can take a look at all the Westbridge activities. We won't be able to go to the green screen right now, but we will in a moment. We will do it after we go to Andre, Atro, and Dean at the party desk. Right now, can I just get a little update from Westbridge, Nathan? If you're at Westbridge, what's the energy there?
Well, obviously I'm not at Westbridge, but the sense of the energy I can get from the many people talking to me behind the scenes of what's actually taking place down there. The question is, which has always been, are general civilians involved in road politics? The group is kind of separated, and I think it's always people's aim to actually get more people involved. And I think this virtual map, which ITV has provided, has done that. And thanks to Dilimeric for installing it, and then obviously Combatant and other in-game admin staff, Dom, George Ross for running it down there, and our public services. We've got the London Ambulance Service having a medical tent. We've got Met officers on standby to provide if any riots kick off or anything like that. And I think the more interaction we get from that, it's great. And hopefully we can do more Westbridge election events coming up, maybe a leadership debate in Westbridge or something like that. That would be quite interesting to see. And yeah, I think Westbridge activity is great to see, and I hope more will be involved. I'm hoping to get some pictures going on the stream. Just waiting for our cameraman to see if we can flash over to the green screen. Or we will head to the party desk now, and we will come back to the green screen in a bit.
Yes, thank you. On to Atrophere.
Welcome to the party desk. Today we have two people with us, two very important people. We have, I believe it was proposed First Secretary of State, Dina Heathcote. We also have the leader of the opposition, potentially the next Prime Minister, we're not too sure yet, Andre Hodge. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you both to the show. First beginning with Dean, what was your thoughts on the exit poll?
Well, where do I begin on that? It could have been better. Atro, it could have been better, but I really don't know what to have expected. This has been, I think, in my 6 years of being in this group now, this is definitely one of the weirder elections I've got into. But I think there's one thing I'm happy about. One thing that's really put a bit of a smile on my face, and that's seeing the Tories kind of do well. I feel like after he whose name shall not be uttered here, and the other person whose name shall not be muttered here, after they destroyed the Tory party, I think it's quite nice to see them. It's quite nice to see them restore the party to a semblance of greatness. Really, I'm quite happy.
And now on to Andre. What were your opinions on the exit poll when you saw it?
I mean, firstly, that is an absolutely great result for Lib Dems. I mean, we got what, 8 seats 2 months ago. So I mean, I would not like to take away from the candidates, from the cabinet, and pretty much everyone else who put work into getting us to where we are now. Yeah, I mean, a positive result. Obviously, it is it is a hung parliament, but from a party perspective, I couldn't really have asked for a better result than that.
This is a question to both of you now, and I think our viewers are very interested in hearing this specifically. So we're going to begin with Dean. So Dean, what are you open to enter any talks with any other political party, and if so, to what extent?
Well, as I was kind of saying earlier about the Conservative Party, they've done really well. I would actually be quite happy to work with them, honestly. Personally, that is. I can't really say much on any further than that, but yeah, I'd be happy to work with them. New Labour is just no, never, nada, not happening. Sorry. A party that couldn't even attend a debate. No, sorry. I don't want you in government. I'll say that on air happily. No. And the Liberal Democrats, well, just look at the campaign during the last week, and I don't think I really need to give a very explicit answer on that. So, yeah, Tories, I'm happy to work with them. New Labour, no. Lib Dems, not exactly.
And on to Andre now. What would you want out of a coalition, and to what extent, if you were to go with them, would you work with junior coalition partners if it happens to be that you're the largest party?
Well, I will start with the Tories. I mean, you pretty much know everything that was everything that was that was discussed, because Nathus leaks it all. But I mean, I'm not sure why Biddy's taking his advice from Naughty Nathus and Crazy Carl, but there we go. We look forward to the prospect of a coalition with the Tories. However, we haven't really heard much regarding it. We'll respect the Tories' will, and if they do so choose to go with Labour and Reform, we will continue as opposition. I think this nation has seen what an unstable coalition can do, and I urge Binny to make the right decision to lead his party and this nation forward. But in regards to smaller parties, I do not think that a three-way coalition would be viable, especially when Parliament is this hung. Although, mind you, actually looking at the results now, a two-way coalition with New Labour. I mean, Reform, as Dean said, no. I mean, I can't really coalition with them, but New Labour is definitely on the table. Brandon's a bit unresponsive, but once we work around that, I'm sure that we'll get to some good discussion.
It looks like we're heading for a hung parliament. Well, that's not an official projection, but it just looks like it so far. I'm not sure if we can get to a majority right now. I've not really looked at the budget seats, but to Dean first, what do you think the next parliament's going to look like, and what do you think the level of bipartisanship is going to be in passing stuff like bills if they needed to be passed by specific parties if they wanted to get anything vital through? And what do you think it's going to be like? What do you think the atmosphere is going to be like in Parliament next?
I think it'll be all right. I think we're past the days of chaos and dismay, Atro. I think when Parliament needs to work together, it works together. People put aside their differences. People will get along when necessary, while also, doing the job of keeping each other to account. It's just how the system works. But I don't see us drifting back into the past. I don't see us falling back into the sort of the chaos and the dismay and the just destruction caused by some governments in the past. Again, governments I'm not exactly going to name because they don't deserve to be named. So I have full faith, really, in the next Parliament. I do. I have full faith in the MPs that will be chosen. I do see that there's a new generation, really, of MPs that are coming forward, and it'll be nice to see them act, really. At the end of the day, it's our job to bring in these new people, and I hope that happens.
And on to you now, Andre. What do you think the next Parliament's going to look like, and what do you think the working environment's going to be?
Reform are in the mud.
Is that it?
Yeah, Reform in the mud.
Okay. Just a final question from you guys. How do you think the term is going to pan out? I know this is sort of similar to the last question, but do you think we're going to head for a fully stable term, or do you project infighting if there's a coalition? What do you think if we are heading into a coalition? What do you think it'll look like? That is Dean first.
Okay. I would sort of liken this to the situation when New Labour first came in, the government I served in with Theo Novak and the Lib Dems of Karanka. I would liken it to that because there was infighting. I'm not going to deny it. Everyone knows there was a lot of infighting during that government, but it was a fairly stable term. People disagreed, people argued, and sure, things got unstable at times, but we got through it. The country was in a better place by the end of it. I can see us repeating the same, really. Though, seeing this is the final question, I just want to add on to the end a warning, if you will, to all parties, my own, Andre's, Binny's, Brandon's. I want to issue a warning in regards to growing toxicity, I suppose. I don't want to see any of that. I don't think many people do, and I think some people can agree that this election went a bit too far at times. So I really do hope we reel back from that. I'm really hoping we do, and I do hope that parties come together to combat that, honestly. Just a little warning from me for the final question.
And Dean, how do you think if we are to head into a coalition, I mean, Andre, that is, Andre, if we're to head into a coalition, Andre, what do you think it'll be like?
It really depends on what kind of coalition it is. I think that there are certain coalitions looking at the seat count, which would work, which is stable, and all that. And I think that there are coalitions, I'm not going to name any names, which could be very, very unstable. And I think that it really depends on whether people put personal greed, or whether they put the functionality of Parliament and the group as a whole first. So I think that once people get their priorities straight, I think that we should see some fairly strong coalitions in the making.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for coming on into this little questioning segment. It's been an honour to have you both on, and we're going to go back to Connor now.
Yes, and before Andre leaves, I just like to let him know that he won the last seat. So 15 for the Conservatives, 16 for the Liberal Democrats, 10 for New Labour, 9 for Reform. Exit poll was just slightly off there, and actually less seats to the two main parties, so it was more hung in the end. But yes, that is the result. The final document is
Can I
out.
just say something quickly, Connor?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
I see Dom talking a lot. In electoral discussion. All right.
That's not attack someone who's not on the stream.
Listen. He wants me to say something. I'll say it. I write off a coalition with Labour, and I also write off a coalition with Reform. All right.
Yeah.
Intriguing then. All right. Well, we're about to then. I believe we're going to go now to the green screen where you can see everything, the pictures of us at Westbridge. If we can go there right now, because there's the scenes at Westbridge are actually really, really awesome whenever we go there. But yeah, let's finish talking about the results now. As you can see, the map is fully colored in, and we have all the results now. I'll say it again for those who might have missed it, and with a little more oomph for those who want to hear it. So, Liberal Democrats on 16, Tories 1 seat behind at 15, New Labour 5 seats behind at 10, and Reform last place, but just barely last place, with 9 seats. The Liberal Democrats won 160 votes. The Conservatives 144. New Labour 196, and the Reform Party 189. The total votes cast were 560. There were 34 spoiled ballots, and there were 37 invalid ballots. There were about 6 ballots that were submitted after the campaign, or after polling closed, and they're not included here. The Liberal Democrats are the largest party. We do not know who has formed government. Andre hinted at some stuff, so we can maybe talk about that in a moment. But we actually don't. There has been no government formed as far as I'm aware. Civil service hasn't informed me. Yeah. Intriguing results. Excellent scenes at Westbridge, though. If you look at all these photos, if you saw all those photos, they were very awesome. Once again, much thanks. So, now guys, we're going into a little bit of a mode where we're going to start trying to figure out who's going to form government, what coalition's going to form, who's going to be the next prime minister. Nathless, what's your gut saying right now? I don't think we're going to get that grand coalition.
I think Binny Boy will be our next prime minister. I think
with who?
I don't think that a major coalition will work between Lib Dems and Tories in our current political climate, and I'm not sure what's actually happening behind the scenes, and I'm sure we'll find out soon. But I believe, or I think, we will see a coalition between the Tories and the Reform Party. But who knows what is happening, if Labour will do something with Tories or not. We will see what happens.
Okay then, and After Fear, same question to you.
Well, I definitely agree with Nathless there. I think Binny Boy 19 is heading for number 10 Downing Street. The odds are in his favour, I'm afraid, for Andre. It seems right now that there could be some sort of arrangement between the Reform Party and the Conservatives, but if not, I think they'll try to get something worked out with New Labour. I think at this rate, and I just it looks like Binny's going to head for it, but I think Andre can still do it. There is still a very, very big chance Andre will be the next Prime Minister. I'm not ruling anything out. It just looks like right now that we're probably going to see Prime Minister Binny.
So yeah, I mean, would you have said Prime Minister Binny was likely 5 days ago? I wouldn't have. Nathless, Atra, would you have said Prime Minister Binny was going to happen?
No, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't have said Prime Minister Binny. The whole election, I've been saying Prime Minister Andrew. I've been saying it to a lot of people, but we never knew the results.
Absolutely not. I think.
And sorry, real quick before you speak, I'm posting in election news a link to Servation's coalition builder. If you want to try and figure out a coalition, go ahead. You can see how on the nose it is. It's a very divided little parliament there, though. Continue, Atro. My dear apologies.
No worries. I think we are definitely heading for. And on your question, by the way, I think if you had said to me a few days ago, Benny Boy 19 will get 15 seats at the election, he could be Prime Minister. He might be up for it. I would not believe you. I'd say you're absolutely crazy. But I think those last few days of the election were really, really, really defining. And I just feel that is it really boiled down to that debate, and it boiled down to today, getting those voters out, turning them out and mobilizing them. I think it looks like we very, very possibly will have Prime Minister Binny, and I would not have believed you a few days ago if you'd even brought the topic up.
Yeah, I know. And while we're talking about Prime Minister Binny, there's still, as you've said, so much that could happen. If you open up the Servation constituency system, or not constituency system, coalition builder, you can see that 16 and 15, that would make 31 seats for a coalition between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats. Of course, that's probably not going to happen. Reform and the Liberal Democrats gets just up to 25, but because the Speaker, Doug Domodome, he is from the Liberal Democrats, so that's one seat off. So it's effectively the Liberal Democrats came first, but effectively it's a tie between Tories and Tories and Liberal Democrats because they're losing that one seat for the Speaker. The results in terms of gains and losses: there's a 9-seat gain for the Liberal Democrats, a 16-seat loss for the Reform Party, 8-seat gain for New Labour, and 10-seat gain for the Tories. Very interesting all around to look at. I think one of those numbers might be wrong a little bit, but I'm not quite sure where. That doesn't exactly add up to 50. Oh, I guess there would be more gains because some parties disappeared in the end, yeah. Regardless, I'm intrigued in general by the numbers that we could see. Liberal Democrats and Labour would get to just 25 with the Speaker gone, but they would have 26 if they decided not to give Doug the seat. As we know, Lancashire was given to the Liberal Democrats in anticipation of Doug running again. Reform and the Conservatives fall short. They fall short two seats of a majority, 1 seat of a minority. So right now, if you're just playing around with it, there's a lot interesting that we can parse out of this. It'll be an interesting night, to say the least.
I think, tonight has been... I think we've seen a great difference to what election night can be, and I hope this continues, especially with the moving Downing Street. We've had the... I'm putting it on everyone's screen now. We've had the map as well. As you can see, we've got the fully coloured map now on camera. You can see the political climate. We've had different interviews. We've had interviews from the public, and I think this is a way forward with election night. And especially with the in-game Westbridge stuff, this is definitely a way to get more people involved. And I think this is how we must do this in the future. I think we can be grateful for everything which everyone's done in game, and especially Connor for his hard work he does and his screaming and crying.
Oh, bless.
The past week.
It is a lot of work to get all this stuff done. And, while we have a little lull while we're waiting for the next results, I'm sure how many people are still viewing? we normally keep good retention rate. 85 still are listening to us ramble, Nathless and Atro. That's how popular we are. But we're doing very well, and I think this is the 6th election night at this point, which is insane. We're almost at a year. The next election night will be a year of election night, which is just insane to me. I did not expect it to go this long when I originally started.
Well, how long till we have an election?
Yeah, true. If we have an election next week, it will be a year.
The thing is, will New Labour now, with their 10 seats, stick to their gut and still support a King's
Yeah,
Speech
I
in
know.
the House?
Brandon is AWOL. We weren't able to get him on the show, and Andre said Brandon wasn't being responsive. What's his name? Benjamin was giving us some intelligence that he didn't really want to go into a deal, but who knows? Because if that deal, Reform, I believe it was Reform and Liberal Democrats, would get right up to 25. And so
Reform and Liberal Democrats will not happen.
Oh, I meant Reform and Labour. My bad. Reform and Labour get over 25, but they get just at 25. That was just the two Reds blended together. Or Conservative and Reform gets just under that. They get 24. But as you remember, because of the way coalitions work, we might actually accidentally find ourselves with a tie because of Doug becoming speaker.
It'll be 24-24. It will be 24-24.
Adds the drama to our lives, doesn't it?
But yeah, I mean, we've seen quite a lot of seat gains, especially 10 seats up from Tories is quite good. Biggest growth. Obviously, we're all expecting Reform to go down.
Yeah, I mean, did you expect Reform to go down that much?
No. I didn't expect Reform to go down that much. I knew we would lose. Well, not we. I'm not in the party anymore. I knew they'd lose some seats. I didn't expect them to go down so many, but I'm sure the party will have a sense of change of direction in terms of naming and branding.
Quite a lot ahead for us to figure out what the next government is going to be. And of course, the civil service going to have to work overtime. It's an interesting time, elections. And of course, if it does come down to one of those really close results, which personally, I was not expecting a coalition to be this close. I was expecting there to be a healthy Tory Lib Dem coalition that would be well over 25. Evidently not. So we might see the King's Speech fail. We have to open that door that we might see the King's Speech fail if it's going to be 24-24.
Well, if Labour are saying they're supporting a King's Speech and it's in their manifesto, I don't think that's going to fail. And I think Brandon just wants to build his party up more.
I definitely don't think they can let go of that. And also, just quickly, I hate to be one who's a conspiracy theorist, who sounds really, really crazy, but Brandon's status right now is busy. I just think there could be things going on behind the scenes. The reason he's not been responsive could be because there's things going on behind the scenes as we speak.
Intriguing. Maybe Brandon's back. Like, I'm hearing word that Brandon might be around talking. So if that happens, we might
Connor, read the election group chat
than we thought. I'll read it in a moment. Yes.
So we're still waiting to hear news from the cabinet secretary or any form of government formation. I don't know. Will this continue in tomorrow? We've actually not seen that in a while.
I don't know. We'll see. I'm getting some word that we might be able to confirm a deal. Okay, I can confirm a deal now from the cabinet secretary. Everyone tense up. Listen closely. Listen. This is an interesting result. It is going to be a Liberal Democrat minority backed up by New Labour supplying confidence.
Oh, very interesting.
That was not expected.
Well, that means it's open to failure.
Basically conceded it live on air. He basically said, he said, Binny's gonna, premiere whatnot, and that Crazy Connor and Nutty Nathless are doing something or something like that. So, Andre's PM in the end. Thoughts? Questions?
Potentially.
Well, potentially, of course, it's going to be the supply and confidence, and this is where the problem comes in. Because I know you're saying that New Labour would, very, very thoroughly pad a conservative coalition. Now, New Labour is not going to be able to, New Labour is padding the Lib Dem minority, but as far as I'm told, there won't be a Lib Dem coalition with anyone. So it's just Lib Dem and New Labour, which gets exactly 25. That's going to be an interesting King's Speech to watch.
Very interesting.
Thoughts, comments, concerns?
I think they could manage to get it through. I think
Sure,
Binny
they can, of course, but it'll be interesting.
Binny eventually, I think he'll budge. Definitely, I don't think he would want to be the sort of leader who'd be like, I calls the country into another election. It could serve well for him if he did that, but I just don't think it'd be good for the country if we were to head into another election. But considering the way things are going, whether it would be good for the parties, I'm not too sure. I think the Lib Dems. I think, in fact, if there was another election, it'd give the party sort of a taster as to where they were if there was to be another election. That is, I think it'd be very interesting to watch. Is what I'm saying. I think it'll pass in the end.
You will? You do think that? Intriguing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I must agree that what I would do if I was Binny is different to what I think Binny would do, just because, well, I mean, when I was in the opposition, I always voted against the King's Speech because that was just, a ferocious opposition and all that. Though I do agree, Binny is a little more docile in that way, that he might not want to throw everyone into another election. Who knows, though? He was willing to go for a government, so he obviously has the taste of PM in his mouth. Who knows? I mean, if that King's Speech fails, he could very reasonably pass another one if New Labour agrees to not nay the next King's Speech that comes. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows?
This is going into an entitled time, especially with such a small minority.
Well, who said it? Dean. I want Dean to eat his hat. He was like, I think the time of uncertainty is over. Eat your hat on live. You were wrong. We're in more uncertainty than we've been in the last few months. Other than, of course, the government that fell apart in a day. We can ignore that. This is interesting. This is very, very interesting result. I did not expect that. I got word of it, and I was like, let me have the cabinet secretary confirm. And
so I've just heard that just before the Liberal Democrats formed a minority government, the Reform and Tories were going to form a coalition.
Yeah, well, that still puts them at 24. It's not enough. That's probably the problem there.
It's still bigger.
So, if I'm Binny,
that is smaller.
If I'm Binny, I can fail that King's Speech if I get really good turnout, and then New Labour will be like, well, if New Labour are going to stick to that, well, I don't want another election.
Knowing Brandon, he is very sticky.
Who knows? And so
even
if we're saying, like, if I'm Binny, okay, 1 second, but like, if also
I'm going to
Binny,
quote
I'm
what
like,
Dom just said.
Okay, after this for a second though, like if I'm Binny and I'm Andre, maybe both of them might want a rematch now that they actually know who the actual competitors are. That Reform and Labour in the back, and they're the ones in front. So maybe they want a rematch. Who knows?
Very interesting. We've just got developments in general chat. Just check election.
Let's hear that. Quickly. Well, let's hear that. Nat Nathan, you were going to say something from there. What did you get?
So, Dom, I'm going to quote what Dom said in the election discussion. Andre has really taken advantage of how brain dead Brandon is.
Okay. Well, I have no intention to comment on that, but apparently there's nothing in return. That's what he's commenting on. That New Labour got nothing in return. Oh, intriguing. I mean, there's so many, there's a lot of deals you can pull with a supply and confidence arrangement. You could even do something like they did in New Zealand in real life, where you have ministers of state, even though you're not in a coalition. That's a little New Zealand, not
whatever it is.
UK.
It's
not very
unstable.
It's unstable. It's interesting. I'm going to be really interested in watching how this one plays out.
I think we're probably going to see another election.
We'll be back in a few days, everyone. If
Well,
hope you
yeah.
enjoyed this one, because we're gonna have another one in 2 weeks. Oh God. No, we'll have it in exactly 1 week. The vote will just be starting the second the King's Speech fails, because I don't want to deal with another one. So let's tweet at election RX, and let's get some of your final comments. Well, we wait. If someone could inquire to Brandon to see if he would, like, if this supplying confidence fails, if the supplying confidence fails, would he vote, against a Tory coalition? If someone could inquire, Brandon is listening and could tell us, that'd
Brandon,
be good to know.
you can DM me.
Yes,
My
we
DMs
can
are
get all the
open
info.
to you right now.
We're all willing to hear what you have to say. It'd be interesting, though, because we might see another election. I mean, obviously, if I am right now, what's his name? Andre, I'm screaming in Brandon's DM, say no, say no, say no, say no. And if I'm Benny, I'm like, say yes, say yes, say yes. It's just interesting. It's interesting.
Oh, Brandon has responded. If it failed, would be open to other options.
He would or would not?
If the speech does fail, he'd be open to other options. Brandon, what other options would that be? Would you support a humble address from the opposition?
Probably.
Interesting. Well, here, yeah. In the meantime, let's look at Twitter. Finn Nolan says a Lib Dems and New Labour deal was unexpected. However, he thinks it'll work well in the long run. Gustav is cheering that it took 15 terms to get into Parliament.
What's happening with Doug now? What is happening with Doug?
Oh yeah, can we get word from Andre on what's happening with Doug? I'm trying to see who else is. We're not getting many comments from people.
Busy.
Vicky, my Taoiseach in Ireland, says that me doing maths live on election night was the highlight of her day.
Yeah, I was doing the same.
Yeah, I can't deny.
Responding to me.
Not a math major. Oh, good. Josiah.
This is ITV breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. Doug, they will be supporting Doug for Speaker. So it doesn't matter.
25 to 24. 25 to 24.
That takes them down much further.
It's all going to depend on turnout.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's a close margin. You know what? I want to say this. Props to Andre for not pulling a, annoying move where he's like, well, I'm not going to support anyone for Speaker, and then we get another inept Speaker. Props to Andre for at least supporting the continuity of Parliament. Good job. Good on him. I have to say that.
I am still very surprised how New Labour has got 10 seats, but we can talk about that after the stream.
But that's what Josiah actually is saying. He said, say what you want about what's happening, and specifically said, well, say what you want about what Dom said. Brandon surprised us tonight, and well done to him. Truly,
well,
I mean,
if I can analyse something there, they're the newest and smallest party in terms of members. They might struggle with the turnout more than the other parties and finding enough MPs in general.
Who are Brandon's? Well, we said this about the cabinet.
Oh, right. They're going to be the ones propping it up.
His cabinet.
Precisely.
His cabinet are more based in other places. Who are his candidates? Who are Brandon's
It's going to be a speech to watch. Oh my God. This is going to be a speech
can you
to
confirm?
watch.
Do you have... I can see different candidates. Can you confirm any candidates switch your cabinet? Will you be replacing any cabinet as... So, Tories will be forming main opposition.
Tories, yeah, they'd be... Intriguing. This is going to be an interesting night. How many viewers do we still have? We won't go on for too long now that we have a government. Thank you, everyone. It's been 2 hours now. We gave you the result.
Tim's disconnected anyway, so...
Oh.
We've got 61 viewers.
That's fine.
Have we not been streaming our voices?
No, we're still streaming. No, I can literally... I saw
Right.
Tim right then click. He's joining. He's back on the camera.
I think something which does need to get working on is immigration.
Oh,
620
yes!
immigrants.
Oh, Gustav! What was
620 immigrants. Andrew, if you're
Oh
listening,
my
good luck.
God.
Get that
Oh
going.
my
Get
God.
that
I
going.
just did 560. Me, Jeff, and Reed just did 560. Worst experience of my life. Never going back to government because I never want to deal with post-election immigration. That's the best reason I have, and I'm sticking to it.
Immigration was alright. I don't mind doing immigration, to be fair.
You want to be an electoral commissioner?
That's because you're strange.
Well, I'm
I
not
hated
strange. I've just learned how to do it the fast way. Technique.
We're doing it poorly.
Oh, nah. I didn't do it poorly.
To sit and you have to scan, you have to message everyone because you want to make sure you're not sending the wrong person. I say that as we just sent 800 people to immigration removal. By the way, if you're listening, check your groups because there's going to be more scans throughout the week for fake UKs. All of you
Down
who
at the
voted,
immigration camp, we're doing more scans.
all of you who voted and were in fake UKs, you've been put in immigration removal center, and you better look out because you also have been tipping us off to everyone else's. So if you get put in immigration removal center after this, you can thank the people who voted and were in your fake UKs.
Connor, wrap it up because Tim wants to go celebrate.
Yes, okay, I forgot. Our streamer Tim is, of course, now Chancellor. Anyways, I want to
his
thank you
bus
all.
just cut me up.
Oh, good. Okay, we're not going to do final comments
sorry.
because we just gave final comments, but I'll wrap it up now very gently. Thank you all for coming. This was, by and large, my favorite election night we've done. We have had a lot of success tonight, and we've also seen successes for some parties. Pretty much everyone except for Reform had a good night, so that's a pretty general net positive. But I want to thank everyone who voted for that excellent turnout, everyone who participated in the election coverage, whether you were watching the stream, in election discussion, at Westbridge, on Twitter, or just looking at the Discord.
Please join the ITV Discord, guys. I need
It was
people.
awesome, and I want to thank Channel 5 for their amazing production, who I'm going to let go in a minute because he wants to go celebrate. I want to thank Servation. I want to thank ITV. I want to thank Lily R. Stewart, or Lily Goodwin, our stage manager, Jeff Malpe, our backstage manager. I would love to thank all the party guests who came on, Atrophier and Torm, who were on the desk but did not come from a media agency. And I'd like to thank you for listening to me and all of us talk. Thank you. This was an awesome stream and an interesting result. Well, as I say now, good night, Britain. Have an awesome evening.
Good night.